California, I'm using it as an example because as California goes, so goes the nation with a lot of different things culturally. They began the postmark deadline rule in 2015, that the postmark was on election day. It didn't matter when the ballot got there. Now, keep in mind, there's a guy named Mark Berman, who is the one who's the mastermind behind mass mail-in ballots in California, turning it into a total mail-in state. You've got kids, Armenian gang members, who drive around picking up ballots, taking them to safe houses in San Bernardino. And I'm saying San Bernardino is generic. They go around apartment buildings and houses around Southern California or wherever they want to do this, and they pick up, steal absentee ballots that are waiting for the owner. They scoff them up. How do I know this? Because mine got scoffed up, and I got called by a sheriff from San Bernardino County one night saying, do you know Alexama Hamalamalam? And I go, no. And he says, well, he's got a car filled with absentee ballots, mail-in ballots, and regular mail that they scoff up also in his car. So the plot is they pick up these ballots, they take them to a safe house, and the Armenian gangs, and I use Armenian, could be any gang, the Armenian gangs broker deals with the politicians. The politicians trying to distance themselves from having cutouts of being involved with the physicality of what I'm telling you.
Not just plausible deniability, but actual layers of not
connectedness. No, so absolutely. So they'll say, I need 10,000 absentee ballots, and the Armenian gang will say, that'll cost you $150,000. So a kid will run out and broker this deal between cash and the ballots. Then you've got another safe house where the ballots are filled out. And then you see what Dinesh D'Souza eventually showed was the person just coming with the ballots and putting them into the ballot drop box. That's what Dinesh caught at the very end. What I'm telling you is there's a whole huge procedure before you get there. And this procedure is this poker game of dead voter lists against politicians within the party itself. 2015, let me just backtrack. They passed a law saying that if the ballot is postmarked on election day, it still counts. You follow that so far? Yeah. And you say postmark. What is a postmark, Viva?
Well, it's someone stamping it and they just flip a number on a sticky device and bam, bam.
So corrupt
backdating in law, and it's illegal.
Right. Corrupt postal officials who are Democratic Union people
endorsing the candidate publicly already.
Absolutely. Are involved in altering the postmark on the stamp. It's very easy. You just change the little numbers and you stamp it. Okay, that's been exposed. So that was a law that they came up with to allow ballots to have the postmark on them of the day, election day, to be counted. Okay, so that went pretty well. And then they changed the law a couple of years later, and they made it 3 days after election day. Just follow where I'm going with this.
If it is postmarked 3 days,
3 days,
3 days after the election day.
That's right. They changed it to 3 days.
I put it in a mailbox, and it took them a long time to get to the mailbox because I'm
That's right. That was the argument. And they kept coming up with this argument that it increases voter turnout as if they're social engineers. Like there are people who don't want to vote. They're basically using an argument of why they're doing this. Forget about COVID. I'm not even going to get into COVID because this happened 10 years before COVID. The argument was it increases turnout as if that's their job. You know, thousands and millions of people don't want to vote. That's a right too, Viva.
No, I'm just saying, like when I send a letter to my kid in camp and they're out in the sticks, they get it within 5 days. There's no sitting in a box for 3 days until they decide to pick it up.
Okay, hold on. The 3-day rule, that law was changed a year later to a week. That was changed to a week. And now that was in place for a couple of years. That wasn't good enough, the week. The week has now become a month. 1 month after election day, you're allowed to count the ballots that came in. It's 36 days technically before the Secretary of State must physically certify the election. But 1 month for the counting. And it was 3 weeks for the mayor's race, which was a small Marxist woman named Karen Bass versus Rick Caruso. And the night that Rick Caruso went to bed, he was up in the mayor's race of Los Angeles, this is 2 years ago. And he woke up the next day and he was still up. Well, that wasn't good enough. They counted for 3 more consecutive weeks until they found enough votes to make Karen Bass the Marxist friend of Fidel Castro, who had been to Cuba 35 times. They made her the mayor of Los Angeles and defeated Rick Caruso by counting for 3 weeks. So the new law is 1 month. It started out with a ballot.
What level of this is at the state level, correct?
At the state level and at the presidential level.
Okay, so
That's
state
right.
and federal presidential
Yes,
elections
yes,
in
yes.
California,
In California, which is the
which is
mega state of 40 million people.
yeah,
And
always it's
this
been
is
blue since Reagan or since
been
after
blue since
Reagan.
Reagan. So now you get Tom Fitton, who sues them in 2019 for the dead voter rolls. He wins the case, and they're supposed to clear out 1.5 million inactive voters. But as those people are inactive voters, more people become inactive voters because there's all kinds of transients coming and going from California. There's people moving in and out all the time. You could clean off 1.5 million voters from the rolls in California, but there's another million people coming and going, Viva. So you have a situation now where Fitton, who did a great job, by the way, with Judicial Watch of suing the state of California and winning this case to get 1.5 million dead voters off the rolls, each month, more and more people leave. Some come in, some don't, blah, blah, blah. Cut to Pennsylvania, which is really what I want to talk about.
I had Fitton on the channel. I was just checking the date. It was a little over, maybe a year and a half ago. Purging the dead people who are no longer inactive voters.
Yeah.
This is happening in California. It's a uni-party state. It's a single-party state.
Yeah.
And the chances, it'll never go Republican again, which is ironic, or maybe it will, but we'll see. This is at a scale now where I'll get to the question because it's at a scale where I don't know how people don't get arrested for doing this. So they arrest people who actually are picking up other people's mail, which is a federal offense.
Yeah, but that's a low level gang member.
Okay.
That's a low level gang member.
They then, the question is this: they get the ballot. It's got somebody's name on it. That person is either dead or doesn't live there anymore, doesn't know that they've got a ballot there.
Yeah.
The two questions are: if that person votes in Florida, for example, they move to Florida, and they also vote in California, the only way to
cross-referencing. There's no cross-referencing.
And then the other question is this: who fills out the ballot? Like, who signs it? That's where
these are Democratic operatives, because once you sell the ballots to the person, maybe running for assemblyman up in Sacramento, he may be running for city council. We had a case where two city councilmen outbid each other on the votes, and the other one accused the other one of using dead voter lists because he was embittered. So we know that's a case. It's usually, because it's a one-party state, it's usually Democrat versus Democrat doing this, buying these voter rolls. So you don't know how much the other one has. They use the polling information to see how close a race is by election day. They will bank these votes and yank them out when they have to. And it is an art form. It is a complete art form on how to play the poker match of spending your voting dollars by saying they found 3,000 more votes over here and they crank them out and the other guy's got to come out with 3 to counter. This goes back and forth in the 3-week period now, like clockwork. So that's a game by itself. That's a game by itself on how to artfully use the ballots. But from the safe house, it goes to operatives who then fill them out for the particular candidate who's buying them.
It's funny that the only reason nobody cares about what's going on in California is because everybody's living with the foregone conclusion that it can never go anywhere but Democrat. And so nobody can
I'm explaining the system.
For 2 years.
I'm explaining the system because now it's going to be relevant, in my humble opinion, in Pennsylvania.
To the swing states and Pennsylvania in particular. Okay. Especially where you've got a corrupt...
It's not going to be the... Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, just a corrupt Josh Shapiro coming out of Pennsylvania.
Right. Again, this is not exactly the same scenario, but I'm going to bring it up to today because you have a situation where the last election, Biden won the state by 80,000 votes. The long count is what's important, not so much the stolen ballots, because that's not happening in Pennsylvania because they don't have the same system as California. But what they do have in Philadelphia and what they do have in blue cities is the long count. And the long count is when they delay the count so they can top the LBJ's opponent, Coke Stevenson. Coke Stevenson's blunder was he told LBJ his final count. LBJ had lost a congressional race 6 years before that when he stupidly, with his campaign manager, a man who was named John Connolly, who will famously get shot in the back in Dealey Plaza, will later become governor of Texas. He was the campaign manager for LBJ. They stupidly told their opponent in the congressional race their final tally. They learned never to do that again.
The long count is everywhere. Like every state can take as long as they want. The idea here is that, as what you're going to get into is that if you don't disclose your count, they don't know how many they need to have.
That's what we were talking about at your house. That's exactly right.
Okay, and then some states like Florida don't have a long count anymore. They managed to count all their
Well,
ballots.
Broward's been doing it. Broward's been doing it pretty recently and very good at it. The black woman who was the former counter, she was almost indicted, and there's a black guy now who did it most recently in the primary this summer. If you want to Google that, you'll find that, if I remember correctly, a black man who is now the county registrar of Broward County said his machines broke down and he couldn't get the final tally. You could do anything you want. But the game is not to give out that final number. That's up to the guy. The
Okay.
black woman who was in charge of Broward County just made out she was an idiot, and she couldn't get the final count out of Broward. That was like 8 years ago.